The Battle of Fort McHenry, part of the larger Battle of Baltimore, occurred from September 13 to 14, 1814, during the War of 1812. This pivotal conflict saw American forces successfully defend the fort against a sustained British naval bombardment, ultimately preventing the capture of Baltimore. Key events: British strategy. The British aimed to capture Baltimore, a crucial port city, by landing troops at North Point and launching an assault on Fort McHenry. They sought to weaken American defenses through naval bombardment before advancing on land. Bombardment begins. On the morning of September 13, British warships under Vice Admiral Alexander Cochrane commenced a relentless bombardment of Fort McHenry, which lasted for approximately 25 hours. The British fired over 1,500 cannonballs and rockets, but due to the fort's robust defenses and recent fortifications, damage was minimal. American defense, commanded by Major George Armistead, around 1,000 American soldiers held their ground despite intense shelling. They utilized fortifications, including a chain of sunken ships that blocked British naval access to the harbor. British retreat. By the morning of September 14, after failing to breach the fort's defenses and suffering significant casualties, the British decided to withdraw. Their final bombardment ceased at approximately 7:30 a.m. Significance: the successful defense of Fort McHenry inspired Francis Scott Key to write the Star-Spangled Banner, which later became the national anthem of the United States. The battle symbolized American resilience and marked a turning point in the War of 1812, bolstering national pride and unity. In summary, the Battle of Fort McHenry was not only a military victory for American forces but also a defining moment in U.S. history that contributed to the nation's identity. The Battle of Fort McHenry, fought from September 13 to 14, 1814, holds considerable significance in the context of the War of 1812 for several reasons. Successful defense against British forces. The battle marked a crucial victory for American forces, who successfully defended Fort McHenry against a formidable British naval bombardment. This defense prevented the British from capturing Baltimore, a key port city, which was vital for American trade and military logistics. Boost to American morale. The successful defense significantly boosted American morale at a time when the nation faced numerous challenges. The resilience displayed by the American troops against a powerful British force showcased their determination and capability, fostering a sense of national pride. Inspiration for national symbols. The battle inspired Francis Scott Key to write the Star-Spangled Banner, which later became the national anthem. The sight of the American flag flying over Fort McHenry after the bombardment symbolized hope and resilience, solidifying its place in American identity. Impact on U.S.-British relations. The outcome of the battle contributed to a shift in British strategy. After failing to capture Baltimore, British forces began to reassess their approach in the war. This defeat, along with others, led to negotiations that ultimately resulted in the Treaty of Ghent, ending the war in 1814. Emergence of national identity. The battle played a pivotal role in shaping an emerging American identity. It demonstrated that the United States could stand up to one of the world's greatest military powers, fostering unity and patriotism among its citizens. The Battle of Fort McHenry was not just a military engagement. It was a defining moment that reinforced American resilience, inspired national symbols, and contributed to the forging of a distinct national identity during a critical period in U.S. history. The bombardment of Fort McHenry during the War of 1812 had significant implications for British military strategy, particularly in their campaign against Baltimore. Here's how it impacted their approach. Overview of the bombardment. The British aimed to capture Baltimore after successfully burning Washington, D.C. They planned a coordinated assault involving both naval bombardment and a land invasion. The attack on Fort McHenry began on September 13, 1814, with British forces launching over 1,500 cannonballs from a fleet of warships, including bomb ships and rocket vessels. Despite this intense bombardment, the fort's defenses held firm due to recent fortifications and the strategic sinking of merchant ships to obstruct British naval movement. Impact on British strategy: failure to capture Fort McHenry. The inability to breach Fort McHenry's defenses forced the British to reconsider their strategy. After enduring heavy fire and suffering significant casualties, over 350 men, the British command decided to withdraw rather than risk further losses in a frontal assault. This marked a critical turning point in their campaign. Abandonment of the Baltimore campaign. The failure at Fort McHenry led to the abandonment of the British land assault on Baltimore. The British had anticipated that capturing both Washington and Baltimore would cripple American morale and compel the U.S. to negotiate peace. However, after the defeat at Fort McHenry, they recognized that they could not secure Baltimore without first neutralizing its defenses. Shift in military focus. The British withdrawal from Baltimore signaled a shift in their military focus towards consolidating their gains in other areas rather than pursuing further aggressive actions in the Chesapeake region. This defeat diminished British confidence and ultimately contributed to a re-evaluation of their overall strategy in North America. Inspiration for American resistance. The successful defense of Fort McHenry became a symbol of American resilience. It inspired national pride and unity, leading to increased support for the war effort among Americans, which contrasted sharply with British expectations of demoralization following their earlier victories. The bombardment of Fort McHenry not only thwarted British plans for capturing Baltimore, but also shifted their strategic priorities. During the War of 1812, ultimately contributing to a stalemate that led both sides toward peace negotiations later that year. The Battle of Fort McHenry, a pivotal engagement during the War of 1812, featured key commanders on both the American and British sides. American commanders: Major George Armistead. He was in charge of the defense at Fort McHenry, overseeing approximately 1,000 soldiers. Armistead had recently fortified the fort and prepared for the impending British bombardment. Major General Samuel Smith, as the overall commander of Baltimore's defenses, he coordinated the American response to the British invasion. Smith directed Brigadier General John Stricker to engage the British forces at North Point. Brigadier General John Stricker, he led around 3,000 Maryland militia troops in an effort to delay the British advance toward Baltimore, engaging them in skirmishes before retreating to the city's defenses. British commanders: General Robert Ross. He commanded the British land forces during the initial phases of the battle. Ross was killed by an American sharpshooter during a skirmish at North Point, which significantly impacted British morale and command structure. Colonel Arthur Brooke. Following Ross's death, Brooke took command of the British forces. He ordered the bombardment of Fort McHenry after assessing that a frontal assault would be too risky due to strong American defenses. Vice Admiral Sir Alexander Cochrane. He commanded the Royal Navy forces that bombarded Fort McHenry, coordinating naval support for Brooke's land troops. This battle was crucial not only for its immediate military implications, but also for inspiring Francis Scott Key to write the Star-Spangled Banner, which commemorates the defense of Fort McHenry. The Battle of Fort McHenry, fought from September 13 to 14, 1814, was a significant event in the War of 1812 for several reasons. Symbol of American resilience, the successful defense of Fort McHenry against a sustained British bombardment showcased the determination and resilience of American forces. Despite being outnumbered and facing a powerful British Navy, the fort's defenders held firm, which bolstered American morale during a challenging period in the war. Inspiration for the Star-Spangled Banner. The battle is famously associated with Francis Scott Key, who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner while witnessing the bombardment from a British ship. The sight of the American flag still flying over the fort after the attack became a powerful symbol of national pride and resilience, ultimately leading to the song becoming the national anthem in 1931. Strategic importance. Fort McHenry's defense was crucial in preventing the British from capturing Baltimore, a major port city. The failure to take the fort marked a turning point in the war, as it demonstrated that American forces could effectively resist British military power. This victory helped to secure Baltimore and maintain American control over key supply routes. Impact on national identity. The battle contributed to a growing sense of American nationalism and identity. It marked a moment when Americans could rally around their military successes and fostered a spirit of unity against external threats. The events at Fort McHenry were pivotal in shaping how Americans viewed themselves and their nation on the world stage. Overall, the Battle of Fort McHenry was not just a military engagement. It became a defining moment that influenced American culture, nationalism, and historical memory during and after the War of 1812. The Battle of Fort McHenry had a profound influence on American morale during the War of 1812, particularly in the wake of earlier setbacks such as the burning of Washington, D.C. Here are the key points regarding its significance. Restoration of confidence. Defiance against a major power. The successful defense of Fort McHenry against a formidable British bombardment demonstrated that American forces could stand up to one of the world's greatest military powers. This victory instilled a renewed sense of confidence among Americans, who had been demoralized by recent defeats. National unity and identity. Symbol of resilience. The sight of the American flag still flying over the fort after the battle became a powerful symbol of national resilience. This imagery resonated deeply with citizens, fostering a sense of unity and purpose during a time when the nation faced significant challenges. Cultural impact. The battle inspired Francis Scott Key to write the Star-Spangled Banner, which became a rallying cry for patriotism. The song's lyrics celebrated American resolve and helped solidify a national identity during and after the war, boosting patriotism. Rallying point for support. The victory at Fort McHenry galvanized public support for the war effort, encouraging citizens to rally behind their military forces. It shifted public sentiment from despair to pride, motivating enlistments and support for the ongoing conflict. Legacy of national pride. The battle's outcome contributed to an early wave of nationalism, as Americans felt they had successfully defended their rights and sovereignty against British aggression. This sentiment would continue to grow throughout the 19th century, influencing American culture and politics. In summary, the Battle of Fort McHenry was pivotal in transforming American morale during the War of 1812 by restoring confidence, fostering national unity, and inspiring patriotic sentiments that would resonate for generations. The Battle of Fort McHenry significantly impacted the British military's perception of American resilience during the War of 1812. Here are the key points regarding this shift in perception. Underestimation of American defense's expectation of easy victory. The British forces, buoyed by their recent successes, including the burning of Washington, D.C., expected to easily capture Baltimore after defeating American forces at Bladensburg. However, they were met with a well-prepared and determined defense at Fort McHenry, which challenged their assumptions about American military capabilities. Demonstration of American stiff resistance. The sustained defense by Major George Armistead and his garrison against a relentless bombardment for 25 hours showcased the tenacity and fighting spirit of American troops. The British suffered significant casualties and were unable to breach the fort's defenses, which highlighted that American forces could withstand and repel a concerted attack from a seasoned military power. Impact on British strategy. Reevaluation of military objectives. The failure to capture Fort McHenry forced the British to reconsider their strategy in the Chesapeake campaign. The inability to secure this critical stronghold led to the abandonment of their plans to take Baltimore, indicating that American resistance was more formidable than previously thought. This defeat contributed to a broader reassessment within British military leadership regarding the feasibility and costs associated with continuing the war effort against the United States. Psychological effects. Loss of morale. The failure at Fort McHenry dampened British morale and confidence. After expecting an easy victory, the realization that they could not defeat American forces as anticipated led to frustration among British troops and commanders alike. This shift was significant in altering the narrative of the war, as it demonstrated that American forces could effectively defend their territory against a powerful adversary. In summary, the Battle of Fort McHenry served as a crucial turning point that reshaped British perceptions of American resilience, leading to a recognition of the United States as a determined opponent capable of mounting effective defenses against superior forces. The weather conditions during the Battle of Fort McHenry played a crucial role in influencing the outcome of the engagement. Here are the key factors: impact of rain and wind. Nor'easter conditions. A nor'easter brought heavy rain and strong winds that affected both American and British forces. The torrential downpour not only made it difficult for British ships to effectively bombard the fort but also ruined their gunpowder and fuses, temporarily neutralizing their artillery advantage. This unexpected weather provided a brief respite for the defenders inside Fort McHenry. Tactical advantages for Americans. Cover from fire. The rain allowed American forces to take cover and regroup, as they were initially under heavy bombardment with limited ability to return fire. The adverse weather conditions disrupted the British bombardment, allowing Major George Armistead and his men to maintain their positions without suffering significant casualties during the worst of the storm. Psychological effects. Morale boost. The endurance of the American defenders through harsh weather conditions became a symbol of resilience. As the rain fell, it may have fostered a sense of unity and determination among the troops, reinforcing their commitment to defend the fort against British aggression. The inclement weather during the Battle of Fort McHenry significantly influenced the outcome by hindering British artillery effectiveness, providing tactical advantages to American defenders, and bolstering morale. The combination of these factors contributed to a successful defense that would become emblematic of American resilience in the War of 1812. The rain during the Battle of Fort McHenry significantly affected the British military's ability to effectively attack the fort. Here are the key impacts. Ruined ammunition. Wet gunpowder. The heavy rain from a nor'easter caused British gunpowder and fuses to become wet, rendering their artillery less effective. This was critical because wet gunpowder would fail to ignite, severely limiting the British forces' ability to sustain their bombardment and fire accurately at the fort. Tactical adjustments: close-range bombardment. In response to the weather conditions, the British fleet attempted to move closer to Fort McHenry to fire broadsides from several warships. However, this maneuver also exposed them to increased risk from American artillery, which had been fortified prior to the battle. Disruption of plans: failure of night assault. The rain and deteriorating conditions forced Admiral Cochrane to abandon plans for a night assault, supported by naval cannons. The adverse weather made it difficult for British forces to coordinate effectively, leading them to conclude that a successful attack was impossible. Morale and psychological effects: frustration among troops. The inability of British forces to achieve their objectives due to weather conditions likely contributed to a decline in morale. Cochrane had initially boasted that the fort would be captured quickly, but as the situation unfolded unfavorably, it became clear that their expectations were overly optimistic. In summary, the rain during the Battle of Fort McHenry severely hampered the British military's operational effectiveness by ruining ammunition, forcing tactical adjustments, disrupting planned assaults, and negatively impacting troop morale. These factors collectively contributed to the failure of the British attack on Fort McHenry. The weather played a significant role during the Battle of Fort McHenry, impacting both the American and British forces throughout the conflict. Impact of weather on the battle: rain and gunpowder. A nor'easter struck during the battle, bringing heavy rain that affected both sides. This deluge ruined gunpowder and fuses, providing a temporary respite for the American defenders in Fort McHenry, as they were unable to return fire while being bombarded by British ships. The rain forced them to take cover, significantly impacting their ability to engage effectively with the enemy. British discomfort. The British troops suffered greatly due to the weather conditions. They were caught without adequate shelter and faced heavy rain that soaked their equipment, rendering many weapons inoperable. This disadvantage contributed to their inability to mount a successful assault on the fort, as they struggled with wet conditions throughout the night. Visibility and tactical decisions. The weather also affected visibility during the battle. On September 14th, after a night of rain, the morning was cloudy with fog over the river, which limited visibility for both sides. This atmospheric condition complicated tactical maneuvers and made it difficult for British forces to assess their situation effectively. American morale. Despite the challenging weather conditions, the Americans managed to maintain their defenses. The heavy rains helped shield them from some of the British bombardment, allowing them to regroup and respond effectively when conditions permitted. The resilience shown by the American forces was bolstered by their ability to endure the harsh weather while maintaining their positions. In summary, the adverse weather conditions during the Battle of Fort McHenry not only influenced tactical decisions, but also had a profound effect on troop morale and operational effectiveness for both American and British forces. The defense of Fort McHenry during the War of 1812 had a significant impact on American morale, serving as a pivotal moment in the conflict and influencing national sentiment. Context of the battle: the British aimed to capture Baltimore, a crucial port city, following their successful raid on Washington, D.C. in August 1814. On September 13 to 14, 1814, they launched a fierce bombardment of Fort McHenry, which was manned by approximately 1,000 American soldiers under Major George Armistead. Despite facing heavy artillery fire from British warships for over 25 hours, the fort's defenses held firm, showcasing the resilience of American forces against a formidable opponent. Influence on American morale. 1. Symbol of resistance. The successful defense of Fort McHenry became a powerful symbol of American resilience and determination. It demonstrated that the United States could withstand attacks from one of the world's most powerful militaries. This victory inspired confidence among Americans who had been demoralized by previous defeats, including the burning of Washington. 2. Inspiration for the Star-Spangled Banner. The sight of the American flag still flying over Fort McHenry after the bombardment inspired Francis Scott Key to write the Star-Spangled Banner. This song would later become the national anthem and serve as a lasting symbol of American patriotism and unity. Key's emotional response to witnessing the flag's survival encapsulated the spirit of resilience that many Americans felt. After the battle. 3. Turning point in public sentiment. The defense not only bolstered morale but also shifted public perception regarding the war. Prior to this event, many Americans were disheartened by military setbacks. However, Fort McHenry's defense revitalized support for the war effort and fostered a sense of national pride. The successful repulsion of British forces led to increased enlistments and public support for military initiatives. 4. Impact on British strategy. The failure to capture Fort McHenry forced the British to abandon their campaign against Baltimore, marking a strategic setback for them in the war. This defeat contributed to a growing belief among Americans that victory was attainable, further enhancing morale across the nation. In conclusion, the defense of Fort McHenry was not merely a military success. It became a defining moment that galvanized American spirits during a challenging period in the War of 1812. Its legacy continues to resonate through national symbols and collective memory, reinforcing themes of resilience and patriotism in American history.